you go back a stage to stage 2, you'd like to think that someone would have had the gumption to have actually run a requirement for services, in Revit terms, a volumetric duct which says there are services here, and that at that stage, and the architect would know that he's got services going through there. So, for him then to be developing that, he's got the aspiration to have that big glazed screen there. He should be saying back at stage 2, look, we've got an aspiration for a big glazed screen here. Is there a way of rerouting this?
Yeah.
You should never get to the point where that is drawn and the architect is complaining you've gone through his pressure.
No, I don't think necessarily the architect in the instance the architect's not complaining. What I'm saying is in design terms, the design evolves in a particular way, and you're still at stage 3. You're still, we use the word design rather than engineering. You're still designing, and this gives you an example of one of the things on the particular project, which you were right. It is what it is. We left quite often in the model, and people some people, not everybody, got upset with this. We left clashes on purpose, so that looks silly, doesn't it? Obviously, services running up through the back of a set of breakers. Yeah, it looks completely silly. But the reason why it was left is because it took ages for eventually the architect and the structural engineer to get round to giving the void and bringing this whole structure down the stairs to a point where you could run the services through. So we could have chose to run them roughly where we thought they were going to go, and everyone would have kind of left. And this is what I'm saying about design. It would have kind of just ignored it, and it wouldn't necessarily have happened, and you wouldn't necessarily have picked it up. Whereas actually, if you show something sometimes actually quite obviously incorrect while you're working through the model, you give people a focus to say, well, actually, I need to sort that out.
Forces the issue. It just forces that issue.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And raises that. You have to do that.
Yeah. But it's no fault with the structural engineer architect. They're busy doing other stuff on the job to try and sort it out. But you need to highlight, and people don't necessarily like this because they want it all perfect and they want to get it in. But people highlight and think, well, actually, I can make that perfect, or I can get it near perfect. But you kind of cloud over some of the issues and paper over the cracks. So again, do we think a stage 3 model could be 100% fully coordinated in class 3? Maybe not.
When you say clash free, can I just ask you about that? Are you talking MEP and MEP or ASMEP?
I'm on about clash free against structure, architect, everything.
Do you think a model can ever, at any stage, at any point?
That's the real question. That's the real question. Now, if you look across the bottom here, again, BG16 refers to another document which I can't remember which it is, but it says that it's 85 to 90% confidence in the design. Yeah. So that's saying that the design is not complete. It's not necessarily. So you could argue that you're not going to get to clash free. Yeah.
What do you mean about 85 to 90% confidence in the design?
They're on about in terms of knowing when they take the design as a whole, in terms of cost, in terms of surety, everything. So you could argue that because of that, it's not complete. Yeah, you could argue the case that you're not going to be fully coordinated as a design team at that stage.
Can I just, sorry to be a pain.
Yeah.
BG6 also, the 2018 one, seems to bring in this idea of tolerances, and it's not just about a geometric tolerance. It could be the boilers plus or minus so many kilowatts. Is there any view on factoring those tolerances into this clash free? Because it could be clash free if you've got a 200mm tolerance. It might, you know.
So you could start to do that, but the problem, mate, we go and we might be able to say this, but my problem with this is that you need tighter clashes on certain bits of the stuff than you do, like you said, a boiler, compared to a runner distribution services. Yeah. They're two different tolerances, so you don't really pick up the granularity as easy.
Yeah, I think we'll sort of get onto that as we get to further down the process, I think.
So technical design, as we said, if we, I know we've got rid of 4A, 4B, 4C, as people talk about, but it's still kind of there's still a process.
No, it's not.
There is
there
are still options.
There are 3 scenarios.
Yes.
Nobody in their right mind does stage 4 3 times.
No.
Unfortunately, an awful lot of people aren't in their right mind of it up here. Yeah. And the reason they stopped at calling it A, B and C was because I went to Bisra and I said to them, look, I'm being asked to do stage 3 4 times every time. can we change the wording, please, and make it look like options?
And
That's what it was all meant to be.
And if you then translate that back to ACE, which hasn't changed, there is only stage 4. Yeah.
On your MPDT then, how do you separate a consultant's appointment to do feasible generic
Yeah.
from,
Yeah.
from a contractor's responsibility to do coordinated specific?
Right, it's easy. The contractor doesn't do coordinated specific, the contractor does stage 5.
So nobody does coordinated specific. They
Yeah,
go
the
from
contractor
A-
will do that, because to get to stage 5 is going to have to coordinate and specify.
Yeah.
But it's up to them the path that they take. They don't need to necessarily, they might choose to use the BG6 framework to do it, they don't have to. The point of BG6 is to say that at stage 4, the consultant will deliver either a feasible design, a coordinated generic design, or a coordinated specific, and then the contractor will price to take from the point that the consultant leaves it up to what they need for stage 5.
Yeah.
Or the contractor could do parts of it, couldn't they? It didn't
If they
necessarily-
want to,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
it
entirely
doesn't
up to the
matter who does
contractor.
it. Doesn't matter who does it, just
So if you looked at the kind of like what we're aiming for, we're saying it's a more feasible design, graphical level, all those sorts of stuff. But then go to the next slide. So it's like extra items that you could argue are kind of definitely in ACE. Optional deliverables are, fully coordinated design, and provide coordination information, that's not associated with the MEP. And then if you look again, going back across the BG6, it's saying that's again using the trade contractor. So you've got a trade contractor, so you could turn around and say that's by the trade contractor at those individual bits of stages to deliver that element of design. And we talked about the various different things you've got to model, and what we've got to model at the time. What it should look like. Yeah. So, this is more general coming a bit.
yeah.
So, what does that start to look like? And Joe has fallen slightly into the trap of using 4A and 4B, but will we use them in terms of the delivery?
Sorry, this was produced before. I think
They're direct analogous, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The same thing, isn't it? But that just sort of shows, certainly from the contractor's point of view, the difference between a 4A and a 4B model. So all the ticks there show what the model's suitable for, and I think that's the point. Is we need to understand what the model's suitable for, and again, who's doing it. And the skills in like the contracting team are very different to the skills in a consultant's sort of BIM team. The consultants, rightly so, are concentrating on the design, the calculations and stuff, and then the contractors are purely focused on detail, coordination, clips, brackets, steel work, buildability and all the rest of it. So it's two very different animals. I think we just need to, like, as part of the appointments, it needs to be clear who's doing what, and it needs to be made clear to the client as well, and everyone needs to sort of be upfront about it. We want to come to the table sort of defining exactly who's doing what and what, set the expectations.
So, let's have a little bit of debate. Now we've got into the more detail-heavy end. Are these clashes?
Go and talk people through them, because I'm looking at this quite close and I can't necessarily see.
Which option are these?
So there's two drawings. There's two drawings here which are very similar in terms of the type of clash. So two images.
And we're at stage 4.
And we're at stage 4. So we're now into stage 4. Consultants done this.
Which option is it? Is this feasible generic?
Let's say it's feasible generic.
Yeah, feasible generic.
Feasible generic is that clash. Or those two items, the one on the left hand side and the one on the right side. So let's have a show of hands if we think that's a clash.
They are clashes, but of what consequence? Should you just move?
Give that one a sandwich.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to look down and out, but you can move around, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So you wouldn't necessarily need to think in the BG6 terms, you wouldn't necessarily have that needing to be resolved, because as you quite rightly said, that could set up to do something slightly different. The other one could cut around the side. So you could start to actually install that in a way that meant it could be done.
What's that? But if you couldn't, it is a clash.
Yeah, you don't know until it's clash resolved, do you? It might not be an easy solution just to raise a bit of pipe or move a duct over, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
it
no,
might
knock-on effects.
it might have a knock-on
Yeah.
effect. You might have to put builders work holes, just steels or whatever, but you don't know because it's a clash.
Yeah, what we said it is without the major rerouting. If it's got the major rerouting in it, then you could argue that it becomes a critical clash.
Was it the BG6 document earlier that said it has to be maintainable and installable?
Yes. Yeah. You have to look at the sequencing. But I'm just trying to highlight the things hitting in a clash detection report. The question is could you display that out a bit more to get a bit more access, those sort of stuff, how does that fit? So you could argue, but generic feasible, that that's not.
If that was a fire compartment wall, then you had to get.
Now you've got a slightly thing, yeah.
Longer.
So that's quite an interesting thing that's people are aware of is the whole things in Grenfell and the fire compartment walls and people going for now proper sleeves, and you guys are really hot on this, where when you put a pipe sleeve or you put a cables containment sleeve, they're actually only certified for 200 mil.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's all sorts of
Distance
guidance.
between them.
And I think multi-service openings are sort of a big no-no as well.
Yeah.
We don't. There's sort of a big problem. So we're trying to figure all that out at the moment.
So if you wanted to, so the argument that Dave is coming up with is, and luckily this job isn't in the UK, it's somewhere else, but I won't tell you where, that if you've got to do a fire compartment between that and that pipe, you need to make sure there's a 200 mil gap between the edge of the fire barrier for the containment and the edge of the fire barrier for the pipe, because they're only certified in 200 mil.
So it's not my area of expertise, so I wouldn't like to sort of talk about it technically.
Yeah, but again, from a consultant's perspective, producing a technical design, you can of course incorporate that.
Yeah.
The issue is when we're told, or when we're requested to lay the services out in that manner, and if you've got to, you're working on a project that's taken, I don't know, 6 months or 4 months. 6 months is luxury, isn't it? 4 months to get from stage 3A to stage 4, and then 2 weeks before you're due to deliver, someone comes up and says, "Oh, you realise that you've got to space all these out a bit more than that for to get the fire stopping in." Unless the guys who are actually doing the modelling have access to that information that's been communicated to them, I think they have a problem.
The issue is that the regs have kind of with Grenfell and the regs have changed, and then the way
the regs
you
have
fire
changed,
stopping and
but
everything else.
That does need to
it
be
is
communicated through the, and it needs to be communicated down through the teams to the guys with the mouse in their hands.
Yes.
We're digressing slightly, but it's about early engagement and giving the people the right tools early on in the process. And certainly about the procurement, you need to know what fire stopping products are actually going to use early enough to actually incorporate it.
And I think as consultants we need to embrace the fire stopping issue a bit more to understand how that volumetrically spaces our building out. I don't think we're there yet as a consultant body, but it's something that I've been looking at it and thinking this is a bit scary, because you might not necessarily be able to fit the stuff in the corridor that you thought you could fit in the corridor because of the way in which the fire stopping works.
For the sake of getting home to our children and other halves, I probably don't want to go too much into fire stopping, but I just want to make one more point before we move on that's related to the up and offender, which is, as consultants, when we say that something is resolvable at any stage, are taking a risk. And we are looking at that with the many years of knowledge that our consultancies might have behind them to say, yeah, I identify that doesn't look ideal, but I know in the heart of hearts of an engineer that can be fixed. If we get that wrong, we're responsible for fixing it later. So it's up to us to decide, are we willing in that scenario to take that risk there, or do we want to go back to the office, play about with it for a little bit and make sure it can be done. So that's up to us to make that decision, I think. And we'll do it for greater and lower risk as we move on. But I do think if we're going to move into fire stopping, we're not going to get home tonight.
This structural engineer dropped the beam, but there is height above the top of the beam, so actually you could potentially go over the top. This is an interesting one. So this one, a bit of the job. So the argument here is the pipes you can see come off the corridor, come across, and they whack straight through a beam.
It's hard to see that, isn't it? It's this beam there, isn't
This
it?
top beam there. Yeah. So, but is that a clash?
I think even me and you have a difference of opinion.
We have a slightly different opinion of it, but And some people think it's a clash. So
It's clearly a clash. Is it an acceptable clash or a critical clash? Is I think the
yeah.
And that's again,
And if you think about if you think about it in the 2D world, we'd have drawn a cut section through the corridor, we'd have made sure all the distribution routes work, and we'd have made sure the tap-offs from the distribution route come in. But and you can say from bad practice in terms of kind of how it's drawn, but you'd have just drawn the thing in 2D, and the plumber, the fitter, and everybody else would have put it at the right level and done everything that was needed. And he wouldn't have a section through there, but just because we're working the 3D drawing, he's got a section there, but look how big the ceiling void is. The ceiling void's like 600 mil underneath it. So if you can't fit that in, and you're going to install it in front of the pipe or through the beam, you're going to be a bit
I
silly.
would call it a resolvable clash,
Yeah,
rather than not saying it's not a clash. But it is a clash,
yeah.
unless it's resolved, then it becomes.
One point I think was made over here earlier on, wasn't it? These are all clashes,
Yeah.
but it's perfectly reasonable to say the resolution for the clash at this stage it will be refined later.
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't be acceptable in a 2D environment because you still have invert levels.
Yeah, but your invert level you'd have spotted, and when it comes to the detailed design, and it comes to the contractor would spot the invert level on in the installation shop drawings. That's a consultant drawing, as an example, at that moment in time.
Which doesn't
and therefore, it works.
So if it was feasible, we wouldn't have put inverts on those pipes.
So this is where
In a 2D world, you wouldn't. I mean, this is an example of what then people do to try and get rid of a clash, because this particular job had a clash, and then someone did something very stupid in the BIM model and just followed all the radios. Yeah. When actually, in a 2D world, you'd have drawn a line, put a dot on it, drawn the line down, put a dot to all the toilets at the back of it, yeah, and the plumber would have put a T and a 90 and made it work. Yeah. So we're taking again in the 3D world some of that.
I think for me, it's how much you want to push down the supply chain to sort out, and how much of the clashes, the design you want to sort out at stage 4 or whatever stage.
But even as a contractor, you don't draw. I used to be a designer and contractor. You don't draw everything. You never did. You always let the electrician, the plumber, do certain elements. Joe and I were talking about it earlier on. That conduits is a good example for the electrician. Certain jobs, if it's really, really detailed and you need to get that level of detail, granularity in it, you might draw the conduits. But in the vast majority of jobs, you don't draw the conduit. The electrician works where all that goes.
Our standard jobs, we don't draw conduits, but we have on a couple where we've got exposed services and we need to fully coordinate. The client wants to see nice, shiny services, so we are doing it in that.
Doesn't LOD 600 require it?
Just thinking out, but I think this is, again, we're going back to what's the purpose of the model. If we are to do an LOD 600 model, then that needs to be clearly defined, and someone needs to sort of, the client essentially needs to pick up the checkbook and pay for it. That's what's the purpose. If we are doing, exposed services or building a digital twin, then we might need to draw everything.
But if you are going to LOD 600, who models the walls? Because the architect won't.
No, so in those particular jobs, we have a team in Lango Rourke who bridge that gap. Anything that the architect won't do, particularly if there's anything that's going into our manufacturing facility, our team will actually take the architectural model and detail it further, develop it further, and draw all the additional stuff in there.
I would take this on to stage 5,
Yes.
so we're going to have to start discussing this in context, just to keep things moving on.
Again, we're saying confidence-wise, there wasn't confidence in it, but
Okay, so stage 5, again, we'll just flick to the next one. I've just got some examples really, and this is sort of just a discussion piece really. So I think, like Adam said, we don't necessarily model absolutely everything. We only go to the minute level of detail and stuff that's needed. So stuff like these DFMA modules or the plant skids, everything on there needs to be millimetre perfect because we're manufacturing it in our manufacturing centre. We're taking that on site and essentially plugging those in. So for this particular part of the building, that does need to be modelled to the nth degree. So just flip to the next slide, Andrew. So these are some of the other examples of our modules. So, horizontal distribution modules and risers, all of that stuff we would model to the nth degree, to millimetres, brackets, clips, steel work, absolutely everything. So you just flip to the next one. And there's an example of another plant room that we did. So you can see that's the sort of detail we'll go to in the plant room. But if you don't know if that video will play on.
This video, is it?
So just get just a bit of a fly through the model. So that's the sort of detail we'd like to see at stage 5. You know, and I think this was actually done by a consultant on the behalf of Crown House. So, you know, consultants are doing this level of detail, but they were given by us all the manufacturing guidance to do it. You know, and we sort of collaborated throughout stage 3, 4 to actually put that together. So it's a bit slow here, but that's the sort of level of detail we'd expect. But not for everywhere. It just needs to be the bits that need to be. I think that's the key point to take away, is that only going to the level of detail that is required. So for that particular part of the building, it is required. Same with the plant rooms, major distribution routes, critical parts of the building. Yeah. If you just go to the next slide, Andrew. So this is one of our models. See, even at stage 5, this is a contractor model. We've got stuff floating outside the building. Stuff's not fully coordinated. So even at stage 5, sometimes some of our models aren't fully coordinated. The bits that need to be, risers, plant rooms, are. But I think it's just making it fit for purpose. We just need to focus on, you know, we've got all these standards and all these terminology, but I think just needs to have a sensible discussion between the architect, contractor, designer. It just needs to be sensible.
So if we go into the what's class resolution, you're key to this.
Okay, this is an attempt to help people understand what they're getting. I think an awful lot of arguments and conflicts arise when people don't know what to expect from a model. So you deliver a model to the client and an architect and say, here's the model, I'm finished up to this point, and they go, great, it's perfect. So with Cibse, that's back in 2016 now, we're trying to define a way of explaining to the receiver of a deliverable, it could be a drawing, it could be a model, it could even be a spec really, the extent to which it's coordinated with the rest of the project. So for example, if you were to say that my model is coordinated to D1, then when I'm looking in the plant room, coordinated with MEP services only. So if it's starting to clash with other parts of the building in the plant rooms, you need to explain to them that the model's not ready for that yet, stop worrying about it, we are on it, we know it's got to be done, but we're not here yet, so don't panic. Likewise for the rest of the distribution routes, but if you're looking at a D2 level of coordination, which is the bottom of the blues, if we are clashing with architectural and structural elements but claiming to be at that level of coordination, then it's good that the architect is coming back to us and explaining that they found elements that are clashing. So it's an attempt to try to get rid of some of the arguments before they happen, because we need to explain to them and we need to tell them that it's not going to be perfect until the very end. It might not even be perfect then. Yeah. And once they realise that, most people do take to that discussion quite well. And I've used this in some projects and it's not necessarily had the best reception, but once people get used to the concept, it seems to work. Unfortunately, the naming does look a bit like the old RIBA stages, but because RIBA changed from letters to numbers, I was kind of stumped. I didn't want to use Greek, so we went back to letters. So that has caused a bit of consternation, but it doesn't take long to get used to.
So this is something of old. Not necessarily that we use this that much anymore, but these, like the more mature of us, would say they used to remember historic ACE fee scales. So in the old historic ACE fee scales, there was performance duties, which was writing a performance spec, enabling that to go out and enable somebody to do a design and build contract with it. There was an abridged duties, which was kind of, again, a design which would, let's say, in the old one, a 4A, but a feasible, generic feasible design. But there was a thing called full duties with coordination. And we seem to have lost a bit of understanding of that, because that's why you've got an optional service within ACE, and that you subtract a premium on the service that you were giving people. And full duties with coordination gives you anywhere in between 2.5 to 3, maybe even 3.25% of the MEP value in coordination. And Joe and I were just talking about this and saying, depending on the job, and depending on the pressure they've got, you said you go to other people that would give you that service, and that it would be that, and that's what they charge. And there are plenty of businesses out there that make money off doing that full duties coordination element. But we seem to think that we're going to get that for the standard fee sometimes in the digital world. Then we've got.
Is it me again?
Yeah.
This is actually related to the last one. So prior to the level of coordination being discussed, myself and a colleague devised this, which is remember in the back of the old road atlases we used to use, you can figure out how far it is from Exeter to Dundee by drawing two lines. Well, this uses the same method. Orange being MEP, purple being structural, blue being MEP, purple being structural, and orange being architecture. And down the left-hand side is all the MEP services. This uses Revit categories as a way to delineate it, but the concept works no matter what list you use. You can use Uniclass quite successfully. And you basically, the boxes, you probably can't see them because they're quite small, include a stage number. And you say, don't bother worrying about clashing these elements until this stage. So there's another way of doing it. What I said to everyone at the company I used to work for was, when you go around to your friends at Christmas, when you go see your parents, when you see everyone, just give everyone you know a copy of this. Just a nice standard copy and give it to everyone you know, and then people can start to understand the topic a little bit better. So if you get in touch with Adam after this, I'll happily email you a copy of this, despite it being highly privileged copyright.
That's just a blow of that, explaining
Yeah.
that. There are, Cibse also, the SDE produced class and model review meetings, so you can use that to give you some advice if you're going to try and do reviews on models from a coordination perspective. And that can then be obviously put into class detection reports. So, in summary, so I would say know the appointment, yeah, and understand what the various different stages they're being asked to do to try and bring that through. Coordinate appropriate to the stage. There's got to be thinking in terms of the map you draw and also how you coordinate it.
Modelling to the appropriate stage.
Yeah.
Don't go into too much detail too early. Is one point to take.
Depending on as you get further through the design, clash resolution, we're going to say take to stage 4. Clash resolution takes significant resource. Yeah. Not all clashes are clashes.
I think that statement could do with being explained. I think we did this decode that earlier on, saying they are clashes, but it's all right. So
Yeah. We'll probably change that.
Yeah.
Remove all critical clashes. Yeah. Don't use the BIM clash detection report, I would advise, from my just personal opinion, until you start getting into stage 4. It just can cloud the problem that you're within there. Yeah. And then don't let the BIM clash detection report drive coordination, because what drives coordination is you're actually talking to people and trying to sort stuff out. Yeah. And within the hour.
You've been an awful lot less fighty than I expected, so we do have a few minutes.
We have thank you all, and just questions, thoughts. What do we think we need as an industry to try and help us in this? Because I think it is something that would be, I personally think it would be beneficial to try and help the industry to, if we can come together as consultants and contractors under the banner of Cibse and the SDE, to then work out what we think is right, then hopefully that gives us a bit of pressure that's alleviated via some of our other co-professionals.
It's clarity then, isn't it? Everyone knows where they stand and what they should be producing.
Well, so the Christmas present idea is a great idea, because it means to get the client to understand that as well. He's not going to quote you on day 1 for something that's going to be in day 5.
Yeah.
And if you look amongst the team, you know where it's going to be managed correctly. It's management, communication.
I think it's understanding that in the old 2D world, I've not been in the industry quite as long as I look like I have been, but back in the day in 2D, you could hide an awful lot of shite in your drawings, some really terrible designs, and it was up to Joe and his chums to figure it out in the last minute on site, because it wasn't worth them coming back and arguing with us, because no one had time. But now in 3D, we've got Navisworks, and suddenly every man and his dog can throw stones at the consultant. And we've not geared ourselves up with the right word and the right arguments to defend ourselves, and often we're put in an undefendable position, I think, because we do make some major mistakes, and it's too easy for people like Joe to sit around the table with poor consultants and just hurl abuse at us, and everyone thinks we're idiots, and then even when we're right, no one's listening anymore. So what you said, let's get them prepared early on.
I think you're right. I think one of the problems with it is that we want to big ourselves up in some respects by producing pretty pictures and saying this is a fantastic pretty picture of how it all goes together. We've got to release that information too early, and we get hit by it often, and it comes back with the sometimes things are done. classic thing here in Revit. If you're producing, if your deliverable is